Hello everybody and welcome back to A Strategy Connect. Today we're going to be talking about 5 essential skills for future counsellors that will hazard a guess to say some of them you've probably never heard of. As a whole, we're probably all familiar by now with concepts like empathy, active listening, mindfulness, sympathy, and similar concepts. And if you're not, have a look at the video linked in our description to get comfortable with the basics first. But if you are familiar with these concepts, it's important to remember that these are just the tip of the iceberg. And if you're ready to go one step further and expand your learning into really impressive territory, then stick with us for the next few minutes. If you are serious about becoming a counsellor and helping people using skills just like this, then check out our CPC-AB Level 2 course through the link in the description, which is the first course that you would need to complete to become a qualified counsellor in the UK. So we are going to cover paraphrasing, summarising, encourages, holding silence, and meta communication. By the end of this short video, you will not just know what they are, but how to use them and why they are so important in creating transformative therapy. To begin, let's start with paraphrasing. This is a word that we've probably all heard before, but in the context of counselling, it's about restating what the client has said back to them to show that you've understood them. It sounds really simple, but it's such a powerful tool to build trust and clarity, and it's often used in the person-centered approach. And that is why it's so important to have this skill in your counsellor toolkit, because it can be applied to so many different approaches. Here's an example. As a client, they might say something along the lines of, I feel like I work really hard, but nobody notices or appreciates it, and honestly, it's exhausting. If they were to use paraphrasing, the counsellor might respond with, it sounds like you're feeling really drained because your hard work isn't being recognised. Now, this does two key things. It makes sure the client feels heard, validated, and understood, but it also makes sure that there's no miscommunication between the client and the counsellor and no vital bits of information have been missed, which is really, really important. Next up, we have summarising, and this one sounds really simple, and it is, as long as you know exactly how to do it. Summarising helps the client and the counsellor take a step back and look at the bigger picture, and it kind of helps to bring together all the key points of their session. It gives the client a really clear vision of what's been discussed and where they're headed. Here's an example. Counsellor might say, okay, so today we discussed how your frustration at work is tied to feeling undervalued, and we discussed a few strategies to help address that, like having a really honest conversation with your manager. Does that sound about right? By summarising this, the counsellor has helped reinforce the focus of the session, and it helps the client to leave with direction and clarity. It's also a great way to help the client transition smoothly into the next steps or their next sessions and reinforce the focus of that original session that they can use in post-therapy homework, reflections, or even journaling. The third skill we have is encourages. Now, this is a verbal or non-verbal prompt to show the client that you're engaged and to encourage them to keep sharing. They might seem small, but they are incredibly effective. And here is a key example. A client might say, honestly, I've been feeling really overwhelmed recently and I'm not too sure where to start. And as the counsellor, you might say, overwhelmed. Okay, can you tell me a bit more about what that's been like? Encourages are a great way to prompt the client to keep opening up further, and they show you're genuinely interested in their experience. And sometimes a simple nod or a go on is a great way to just keep the conversation flowing. Next, we have holding silence. Now, this is known to be one of the toughest skills to become comfortable with in your training stages, but once you're used to it, it is such a fantastic skill to utilise. An example of this is pretty simple. A client might say something quite heavy, like, I just don't know if I'll ever feel good enough. And as the therapist, instead of jumping in on a response, you sit back, remain quiet, and you give that client space to process their emotions and what they've just said. Sometimes the client will try and fill this silence by talking, and if so, let them. And sometimes they won't, and you and the client can sit together in that silence and give them the space to mentally figure out how it feels to sit with those thoughts and feelings. And this brings us back to one of the key components of therapy, which is oftentimes letting somebody voice their own thoughts and feelings is far more valuable than your own response. By not filling this silence and giving the client space to think and reflect, it can feel uncomfortable, but it's also often when the most valuable insights emerge. And the last skill we have is meta communication. This is one that really isn't talked about that much and definitely not enough. And it means discussing the communication that's happening in that session. And if you're confused, don't worry, let me explain. This is all about being transparent and addressing the dynamics between you and the client. Another way to phrase it is it's just about talking about what's going on. It's a way of observing therapy, making insights and comments on the process, and inviting feedback. This will make far much more sense when we frame it as an example, but one of the main reasons we use meta communication is to devolve power away from the counsellor and give it to the client. As this one is a little bit trickier to understand, here are two examples to help illustrate it. The first one would look something like this. A client might say, I feel like I just can't share everything with you that I want to share with you. And as a response, the therapist might say, okay, I completely understand that, and I appreciate you telling me. Maybe we could think about some ways that would make you feel safer to share openly with me. You see how this example shows that they're talking about the dynamics that are coming up in their therapy process, identifying, addressing them, and discussing them. Another example could be a client saying, I don't know, I just don't really want to talk about that. And a counsellor might say, okay, I've noticed that when we bring up that conversation, you often don't want to talk about that topic at all. Do you want to explore why that might be? And here is why it's so important. Meta communication is a great way to clear up any unspoken tension and deepen the relationship with your clients. It's also a great way to model healthy communication to your clients. Overall, these 5 skills of paraphrasing, summarising, encouragers, holding silence, and meta communication are essential for every aspiring counsellor and therapist, and they go way beyond the basics of empathy and active listening to truly create transformative sessions. If you're training to become a counsellor or you'd like to, these 5 skills will set you apart and make a huge difference in your clients' lives. If you are interested in becoming a qualified counsellor in the UK, check out our CPCAB Level 2, 3 and 4 courses. The link to them to our website is in the description, and these are the qualifications that you would need to become a qualified counsellor in the UK. We are also accredited by the BACP, so you could gain BACP membership. If you are a counsellor or a therapist in training, have you come across these skills already? Let us know in the comments. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend or a fellow trainee that you think would find it interesting. And check out the rest of our videos for more insights in the world of counselling and mental health. And we will see you next time.